Hello there, and welcome to another episode here on the Strong by Design podcast show. I'm even wearing my own shirt today. I don't always do that, but I'm happy I pulled the right one out of the drawer this morning. Coach Chris here hosting the show, and so honored to have our guest today, who is someone that I've grown to really enjoy over the last year, because I have been reading his book, and I'm not a slow reader, but we'll talk about why it took me so long to get through our guest's book today. But it's the topic of the conversation, and I can't wait. I've been meaning to have him on the show for a while, but I really did want to finish the book so that we could have a conversation based on its entirety from cover to cover, and I could really do it justice. Before I introduce our very special guest, I would like to take a moment and say thank you to our listeners for all the ratings and the reviews and the downloads and the sharing that you're doing. We have had record months, 3 months in a row now. When this episode releases, it will release in the early part of April. But January, February, March of 2022 have been our 3 best months consecutively since the show started nearly 4 years ago, May of 2018. So we have hit record months, January, February, and March. And so I don't know what does that due to? Is it due to my amazing talents? No, definitely not that. I really think it has something to do with the subject matter, with our terrific guests that we've had, and maybe just the fact that we've turned a corner here on Strong by Design, where somebody shared it, and it just kind of ended up in the right people's download section of their phone or something, and so anyway, we've just been so delighted and so honored that more listeners have found our show just this year, and we're just gaining momentum, and the show just continues to level up and get better. So thank you so much for all the sharing and all of the ratings and reviews. Please keep those coming, because they really do matter for our show. So our guest today, Mr. Josh Khachadourian, I did say that correct. I've practiced the name many times. I even know how to spell it without looking, and that's an accomplishment all to its own. Josh is a tremendous man, has a huge heart for God, and so just welcome, buddy. This is a long time coming.
Chris, it's an honor to be here. Amazing. You know how to spell my name too. And, you nailed the pronunciation. So thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you as well. And it's an honor to be here.
Well, thank you. Yes, the feelings are definitely mutual. And I'm going to do something I don't typically do here on the Strong by Design show. If anyone, is a return listener, I don't typically read through someone's bio, but I'm going to, kind of put my own spin on it. But it's just because it's so clearly illustrates what our conversation will be about today and why. And so I wanted to touch on some of these things without missing anything. So Josh is a husband, as I am, a father, a leader, a coach, and host of his podcast, Raising the Standard. Okay, so we actually have a lot in common. I actually wrote a little note here that we have so much in common, and that's why I absolutely love this guy so much. There's a lot of similarities between the two of us. Josh has spent 15 years ascending the corporate ladder in Fortune 500 company, where he focused on building high-performance teams and developing best-in-class leaders. Okay, so if you're looking for some great leadership insights and advice in today's episode, you've come to the right place. Josh has encountered and observed the pressures today facing men, and the struggle is real. Okay, so get strapped in, put your seatbelt on, because we're going to go into some pretty important and sensitive areas. Most men are grappling for identity and struggling through challenges in life without a plan. Just as our work life struggles when we don't have a plan or set an agenda, so does our personal life. Our family life, every area of our life will struggle. Jesus provides a plan and sets a standard that is relatively unknown to the modern Christian man. And Josh has made it his mission to show men everywhere that Jesus is accessible, relatable, real, and relevant. A lot of great words there. So we're going to be focused our conversation today on Josh's book, The Standard, and how it's been challenging, changing, and calling men to raise the standard in their own lives. The 4 areas that all men must take dominion in are in their faith walk, their fitness journey, their family life, and certainly in their finances. And Josh helps men that feel the call to expand and prosper in all of these areas. So if there's a guy listening right here that is not dialed in and interested in what we have to say, then I'm at a loss for you, pal. And if there's a lady listening right now, there's going to be some great nuggets in here. Maybe this is something you would like to just listen to and maybe be able to help your man along with, or at least share this episode with him after you've listened to this conversation today. So, Josh, I really want to start, because I feel it's so important based on the material and the content of the book. I want to just talk about your childhood really briefly, if you would, and your own relationship with your father and relationship with God as a young man.
Sure, Chris. Wow. Thank you. Thanks for that introduction as well. So we'll jump right in. I'll just say my own message to the men listening. Even if you're not a Christian and you're listening to this episode today, stay with us, because I think you're going to see a new picture of Jesus. Maybe it's a Jesus you didn't know about. Maybe it's someone you've never met before. You didn't know that some of the themes we're going to talk about today are very relevant to you. So when we talk about making Jesus accessible, Chris, I mean, he really is. So I'll jump in with your question right now and just tell you, I was fortunate to grow up in a Christian home. Okay, so my family were, they brought me up in a great environment. My mom and dad stayed together. I have a brother, and I learned a lot of Christianity, by the model that my mother set for me. Now, my father is a strong man. I honor him. I love him. He is a Christian man as well. He went to church with us growing up for a little while, and then he got sucked into his work a little bit. He's an extremely hard worker. He's got phenomenal work ethic, integrity, and character. I just remember everywhere I went, people would say, okay, we know who your dad is. It was always a sign of respect for my family and who I am. And who my father is and who he represents. But when I talk about my spiritual upbringing, it was more from my mom. It was more from going to church and Sunday school and youth group and really seeing I have a praying mother. It's the reason I turned out the way I did, ultimately, is because she prays. And I had that as a model. And she was the one teaching us Bible stories growing up, me and my brother. And I was always watching her minister to people or pray for people or be at church and be faithful and be in attendance. I didn't always get that from my dad. I got other things from my dad. But I'm really happy to say that right now, as everything's come full circle, my father loves the Lord. That's never stopped. But I think there was a time in his life where he stopped going to church for a little while. He is back. Everything's great. We have an awesome relationship. But that will give you a little bit of the background for how I grew up and some of the themes that I actually touch on right at the beginning of the book, The Standard.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's good. And I was curious, just, my own curiosity sometimes is what it will encourage some of these questions rather than, it's just like I want to get to know the writer of the book a little bit better. And so that it's great insight. But sometimes the spiritual leaders in the home aren't necessarily dad. It's in my case, I had a little bit of both. But that's pretty awesome. I love a godly woman who prays a lot and gets her kids praying a lot. That's awesome. So what inspired you to begin the writing process for this book? And because a book is a big undertaking. Anyone who's ever written a book knows perfectly well, it could take years. What kind of got the ball rolling initially, and then kind of over the course of what timeline are we looking at where we're from start to finish? Did you like put this whole thing together?
Yeah, great question, Chris. So I need to share with you and the audience that I did not set out to write a book in any traditional way, where you buy a course, download an outline, start to like put it together and say, this is what I'm doing, and kind of see the end in mind. That wasn't the way this project even started at all. So to give you a little more perspective, we have to go back to who I am and what I do, because I've been in the corporate world now, and I've been in business. I've been an entrepreneur for a while. I started out right out of college, starting my own business. I sold fitness equipment. I started with one location. I grew that to 3 locations, and then I exited that business, and then I broke into the corporate arena where I was kind of starting from scratch in sales, and then I escalated the corporate ladder there and been privileged to be in a lot of leadership positions and get trained by some of the best systems and trainings that the world has to offer when it comes to leadership and coaching and personal development and professional development. So that's my background. It's important for me to share that because in 2016, I was diving into the Gospels again, doing a deep dive. And with this perspective of like this professional background, right? Not just coming at it from a Christian perspective and not just coming at it from a super deep spiritual perspective. I was reading the word and I was seeing what Jesus was doing, and I wasn't focusing as much on the message, right? I read the Bible, I do Bible study, but this time I was reading in 2016, I was seeing different things that I've missed before. I was seeing the things Jesus was doing in these stories, in these biblical accounts, the way he interacted with his crew, the way he interacted with people around him, his leadership, his communication style, and all these new patterns and new things were emerging for me that I just started taking a personal journal of. I was like, wow, Jesus is a phenomenal leader. Like, I've learned that over here. Like, look at the way he demonstrates EQ, the way he builds and establishes trust and rapport very quickly. Look at the way he's engaging crowds as he's invoking curiosity. He's using a coaching approach. Jesus will only answer 3 questions in all the biblical accounts, but across the 4 Gospels, he asks more than 300 questions that the writers actually record. So that's what I learned as a coach. That's what good leaders do. Like, they're invoking curiosity. They're pulling you towards the message that they're carrying, and they're taking you on this journey of discovering something. And that's what I saw Jesus doing. So I started seeing these patterns, these things that were emerging, just revelation. And I was like, just sitting with it, going very slow. And I started writing this in my journal and just documenting. And then I just, on the paper, I'm like literally in a word file, like moving things around, like, wow, that goes here. And like, look at this, like, look at all these categories and like the way my systems brain is approaching this. I'm like, this is amazing. And I thought it would be a Bible study at some point. You know, I've led some men's groups and I've done some different things. But along the way, I'm like, I think this is going to be a book at some point. And then as time kept going on, I was more faithful with it. I kept digging in and I couldn't get away from it. It kept calling my name every morning. I was going into the scripture and I was like, wow, look at this. And now I'm not just reading, but I'm documenting and I'm studying and I'm looking things up. And along the way, I realized, okay, I have something here that I want to bring forward. And it took years because I didn't set out to say, hey, I want to be an author. Like, I do like to write, but I never said I want to start by I got to get my name out there. I want to build a brand. Actually, the opposite of that. I really am cautious about that stuff. And when I finished the book, I sat on it for months, actually. And I wasn't sure what I should do with it because I was nervous about the cascade effect of what will happen if I release this. I was dealing with some perfectionism, right? Because I suffer from that too. And I was like, I don't know. And there's nothing more vulnerable than putting yourself out on the internet with 50,000 words that you wrote to let people judge, evaluate, and do whatever they want with. And then finally, I heard clearly that now's the time to go, and I had to be obedient when I got that. So that's where we are today, and led to this. Now here we are. We're talking about something that I was studying and writing and storing, and now we've released it, and here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and now it's in the hands of thousands of people who are being changed by it. I remember sharing this with a few friends over the summer when I had, the early part of me reading it. And I know I don't know if I had gotten extra copies to give out, or somebody saw me reading it and I ordered, and they showed interest, so I ordered extra, something like that. And I got feedback from a couple close friends who were saying how much they were just loving it. And that brings me to my next, actually, I'll get to this other question after I get to this question first. I have a bunch of questions. When you read a book and you get to talk to the author, you get a lot of good insight, or insightful type questions, that I want answered. Before we get to the way the book is written, has it been hard for you, certainly in corporate America, but has it been hard for you to talk openly about your Christian faith in what I feel like today is a largely secular world? And even though that many people will say and identify as Christian, they're not necessarily walking that out in the way that they live their life, right? They might identify that way, but I mean, come on. When push comes to shove, who are they surrounding themselves with? How are they behaving? These things. Who are they connected to? So has that been a real challenge for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always challenges whenever we're in the world, right? We're in a counterculture to our belief system. So what's that look like as we walk that out? It's a great question. And I'll also preface by saying there's seasons we go through, and there's different places and positions we find ourselves in as men and women, where the Lord has us in that season of life. And there is an appropriate response for how do we always live the right way, but there's a covert and an overt time. So there's a time for being covert where I don't have to, go around and carry a Bible with me or anything like that. So there's this time of being covert where people see something different about your character, the way you live, the way you lead. So there's a lot of that. And then there is a time to be overt. I believe you have to do both. There's two different sides of the coin. Some people say, hey, just, share your faith by your lifestyle and you don't ever have to use your words. And I understand what they're saying there, but you do have to use your words at the right time. We have a mutual friend, Frank Rich. I was fortunate to share my faith with him, and that led to, a huge trajectory in his life where he met Jesus because I opened my mouth, not just because I was being a good guy. So there's two sides of that. But I would say first, it's always good in your character and your conduct, the way you walk, because people are watching that, right? And I've got a chance to do that specifically to your question in a corporate environment, leading a team. What's that look like? Like, people might see my style. I use the style that I see in the life of Jesus as a leader. He's a servant leader. He's serving people. There's different types of management styles and the way directors lead and the way they grow their team and the way they establish trust with people. And some push hard and others are there more of in a serving style. So those are some approaches that I use. They're just part of who I am. And then that can lead to open doors and really great connection and conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that underlying persona or character. There's a light inside you that others are seeing, and sometimes they can't even put their finger on it necessarily, but they're attracted or drawn to it. And we had been doing that for quite a while at Critical Bench without, long before we had the podcast, just in the way we created content, the way we spoke to people, the way we handled ourselves on YouTube, right? The way we handle ourselves anywhere, in the way we wrote blog articles and stuff, and not be attacking and not be vulgar and not be, pointing fingers and stuff, and just being a little bit more, I don't know. It's great though when people notice that, whether they know it or not, they're liking what they're feeling, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, and they want to know a little bit more. So they'll dig a little deeper, and then people will say, "Oh, I didn't even know you guys were Christian or something like that. But I've always liked you, that kind of stuff. I've always liked your content. So it's really, really cool. So yeah, I wanted to know from your experience. So, okay, let's dig in a little deeper with the book itself. Why did you write the standard? And I know you kind of already talked about how you were piecing things together and like fitting it together, almost like a puzzle, right? But you wrote it in a particular way. Explain the 6 sections of the book and the way that it reads almost like a devotional.
Right. So I put this together in an order, and the book's called The Standard: Discovering Jesus as the Standard for Masculinity. So we're really talking about masculinity, like what makes a man and what's it look like to be a man. And I started seeing these different, we'll say, chapters in his life. I was seeing things, these stakes in his life, these pillars that were emerging. And I said, right now, Chris, I'm just going to go here for a minute. Like right now, there's huge movements. There's men's movements in the earth right now, right? There's lots of stuff. Like the church has always had Bible studies, devotionals, biblical studies about manhood, masculinity, Christian themed conferences. And now we're seeing more of it in the world, right? We're seeing people that are not necessarily Christian or running a Christian organization, and there's movements of men rising up, which is great. And what I see in those movements typically is reactionary to what the world's doing, right? The world is bringing up this term of toxic masculinity. They're trying to force men into a box. You can't really be a man. They're blurring the lines. There is no man or woman. You get to choose what you want to do, and there's no differences. We don't respect any differences there. And we're in a cancel culture. So the response from the world is, well, I'm going to man up. I'm going to man up even more, and I'm going to show you what a man does. And they're great movements. A lot of these themes are really needed, and they're restoring planks or aspects to our masculinity that's being downtrodden right now. So providing, protecting, right? Doing the things we do, using that warrior motif to like go after the protection and what a man really does. And all those things are accurate. I don't have a beef with any of that stuff. The standard's a little bit different because I do touch on that, right? We're all called to be protectors and providers. That's from Genesis chapter 3. This is the original mandate for man. So that is part of our DNA, and that's our original design. However, I also see other things in the life of Jesus. And by the way, he is confrontative, and we'll talk about that. He is a warrior, and he demonstrates what it means to have strength and what that looks like as you express that organically, standing up for those that are downtrodden, executing justice, and defining and showing us what true masculinity does and what it is. Now, the other aspects I bring out in his life bring a balance. There's also, it's not just, when we say masculinity, it really triggers people. And they're like, well, what's this book about? Or what are you going to say? Because they think like, you and I were probably the same generation. So like Arnold movies or Rambo, or you're only going after like, let's go hard, right? But there's this other side where Jesus shows us where like even the emotional side, he demonstrates his emotion. A real man can show their emotion, right? And he's just as much a man when he's on his knees teaching a child or demonstrating an emotion to us that we might say, whoa, that's way too vulnerable. He's just as much a man, and that's just as much part of masculinity that when I'm providing or protecting for my family. So I bring this balance of, it's not just what the world thinks, like, hey, warrior, let's go hard, let's fight, let's save the day and provide and protect. I love that stuff. However, it starts with the way he leads himself first, because, we're really talking about leadership. And leadership always starts with yourself. You're not qualified to lead anything or anyone if you don't lead yourself. And the people that become leaders that have never mastered themselves, they're the ones that we read about in the news, because eventually that building falls over and there's cracks in the foundation and things don't go well for that man. So Jesus starts and he shows us what self-leadership looks like. So that's where we start the book. That's the first pillar or the first section, the book within the book is self-mastery. And I use the image there. You'll see that I have these images that kind of correlate with each section of the book. They kind of just were like downloads I got in my spirit. And, Jesus was a builder. Like, he built physically. He was a blue collar guy for the majority of his life, and he would have used measuring instruments. And the ancient measuring instrument would have been a measuring reed or a measuring rod. So I use that as the symbol to say he's the one that builds according to his alignment, his structure with symmetry. And guess what? He's still building today. He's still building men today. And so we start with self-mastery. You want me to keep going, or do you want to interject anything, Chris?
No, it's perfect. Please continue with the way the book is assembled.
Okay, so the next.
I have, in fact, anyone who's looking, I have the book here. This is the page I was trying to get to, that shows the different symbols. So you can see them.
Yeah, I worked with an artist to have him illustrate those. So I really tried, to your point with the short chapters, I really tried to tailor this for men and make this a book that you wouldn't want to. I'm so thankful you gave it away, but my goal was I want to make something so cool that you'd be like, you know what? I'll buy you one because I don't want to give you my version,
right.
My copy.
Right.
So
I hear you.
So that's what I was going for with that. So we put a lot of work into the design of it as well. But I'll keep moving on here. The next thing is leadership. So we talked about leading yourself. Well, then you're qualified. Then the sequence takes you to how do you lead others? And what I'm talking about, even if someone's listening and they say, hey, I'm not a leader of people right now, like I'm not a manager, I'm not even aspiring to be, that's fine. You're still called to be a leader in your life because we're called to lead where we are. And that's our sphere of influence. Who are those people that we touch in our life? It could be your family, your colleagues, your coworkers. Doesn't matter if you're in a formal leadership structure or not. We're still called to be leaders. Everyone's a leader, and you were created to be a leader. And for that, we use the shepherd's staff, because that is the instrument of a leader, and we talk about that in the book. After leadership, we get into communication. How does a man communicate? How did Jesus communicate? And I touched on a little bit where he's not afraid to show emotion, and he tells stories, and he invokes curiosity, and he asks questions, which are amazing. And for communication, we use the symbol of the chisel, because Jesus is still speaking today. So Chris, even when you and I were having this conversation about how do we even share our faith in the workplace, and you actually, really appreciate what you say, what you said when you talked about critical bench, the work you guys do, and people notice something's different, right? So it's not just because you're a good guy. There's lots of good guys in the world, and Christianity is much more than a set of moral rules, right? I'm all for the Judeo-Christian ethic our society is founded upon. Let's preserve that. But Christianity is more than just a moral code. So there's a person involved. There's a presence. We have the Holy Spirit in our lives that draws people to Jesus through us. And that's what people are sensing. And when he speaks to us, his purposes are done. So in the communication section of the book, we talk about the chisel. This is a tool that Jesus would have used in the natural. And guess what? He's still using it in my life every day, because when he speaks, he's chiseling, he's showing me things, he's carving me into the person, the man that I am called to be. So that's where the communication comes in. After that, we touch on empathy, and that's that whole emotional quotient. And we dive deep into the way Jesus displays emotion, the way he's not this stoic stained glass figure, so depending on how people went to church or what your cultural Christianity viewpoint was, whether you have one or not, he's not boring, he's not plain, he's not emotionless, he's not distant. So we see all the range of human emotions. He made us as emotional people, right? He gave us those emotions, and he demonstrates them for us, the proper order and the expression we should have with the way we express ourselves. And then next we go into confrontation. This is the one guys love. This is the sword. And this is where Jesus came to bring a sword. He brings a confrontation, and he tears down structures, he addresses injustices, and he puts things back in their proper order and alignment. So we touch on that and what's that look like for us as men where we are today. And lastly, I wrap up the book with a section on love, because at the end of the day, we can talk about all the characteristics of Jesus, but we can sum up his character in one word, and that word is love. That is everything that's driving him, a love for his Father and a love for us that's just exemplified in his mission. Every action he takes, every person he heals, every word he speaks, every question he asks is all motivated by love to bring us back to the Father and bring us back into the original intention and design, strong by design, and that's the will of God for us.
That's right. I like how you weaved our show name into that.
I was looking at your T-shirt, so great choice today, because I'm like, there it is, right in front of us.
Right. Well, and sometimes people, there's a double meaning behind the name of the show, and I've mentioned it in previous episodes, but sometimes maybe there's a new listener who's, okay, yeah, Strong by Design. That sounds really cool. But it's twofold, right? First, we're created strong by design. By design, by our designer, by our creator, right? Purposefully made. But we also have to live out that. We have to live our lives strong by design, by the way we design our lives, right? So that's an ongoing, day by day, choices are made, decisions are made, actions are taken, right? So there's two parts to it. But all of everything's there for us. It's just, are we willing to do the work, get our hands dirty? So one step further with the way this book it reads, because there's some people out there that are saying, I'm not a book reader. I just don't like books. And I know a lot of them, I'm sure you do too. People, they'd rather maybe go listen to an audio book, or they just don't like words on a page. But what makes this book so digestible is because everything is really, you've kept everything really broken up in a very nice way, where you could go just 1, 2, 3 pages, and that's a section of a chapter. Okay, and so I read it. That's why it took me so long to read, as I alluded to at the beginning of the show, because I read it like a devotional. I have a stack. This is my stack, okay? I got my man, Tony Evans, Kingdom Man. I got my Bible, okay, right there. I've had this since 1988, I think. And I love this too, by the way. Put a little Bear Grylls action. If you didn't know, this guy's a diehard Christian and has an amazing heart for God. That's why everyone notices something different about him in this world, and he is amazing. And he spoke at GLS several years ago, and I got his book, which is a devotional. And so I read through those as I do this regularly. And what I love about Josh's book, The Standard, is that it pairs really nicely with everything else, where I can just read something that might be just 1 or 2 pages, and it's followed up with a coaching section, kind of like real world application right after it. Will you just talk about, coming to that decision to put it together that way?
Yeah. That was great, Chris, and thanks for sharing some of those new books with me. Here's what I'll say, guys. Number one, The Standard is not about me. So it's not about Josh K's life and going deep dive into me. It really is heavy on scripture. So it serves really nice as a study guide, a companion. I mean, I'm honored by some of the texts and messages I get from guys that keep it right with their Bible, and they kind of use it as a reference tool, and they read it as a daily reader. So I did purposely, I like, and you know this, we like to get the sense of accomplishment as well. So I can read a quick chapter and I'm like, wow, I did it. I got to the point. And the other part of why I wrote these chapters very concisely, hard-hitting and impactful and short is I wasn't trying to add to the book and write fluff. We all got books where I'm like, okay, this is like a famous person who hired a ghostwriter and they have to have a book, and there's a lot of fluff in it, right? You could have cut out the whole middle section. So with this, it's really hard hitting, impactful, and gets right to the meat. I don't like fluff. I don't like, throwing extra words in there just for the sake of it. So tell me what I need to know. Tell me what you're going to tell me, get to it. And then I follow it with a coaching section. I might share a little insight of how this applied to me, but it's really there where I'm serving as a guide. I'm serving as your coach. So it's not a biography about me. It's how do you take this and what do you do with it? Hey, this has been my struggle. This is how I've applied this. This is how I wrestle with this. And here's my challenge for you. So I'm trying to issue a challenge after every chapter where we go introspective and look in the mirror, right? Which is really coaching. It's really it's all about feedback, and we have to give ourselves our own feedback sometimes. And that means we have to look in the mirror and say, am I really living this? How can I exemplify this? How can I apply this? So that's the heart of it, is make it digestible so you can take action.
Right. Absolutely right. And you said it very well, and it's exactly what I wanted to express, is how quickly you can gain from this book and apply it to your life and have just something in your head to carry with you for the day and live that out. And it was terrific. And so great. So this is something I was really interested in speaking about, because when people think of Jesus, the real man, Jesus, and by the way, yes, he lived 2,000 years ago, lived to be 33 years old. He's a real man. That's why we're still talking about him today, right? It's why a bunch of people ended up putting together this thing called the Bible, the New Testament in the Bible about him, right? That's what the Old Testament's all about. So, but when people think of Jesus, they think of this really nice guy who just walked around and talked with people and told, was loving and just very kind. And then people throw around he was meek. And when people hear the word meek, especially today, today's culture where distorted meanings and people don't know what words really mean anymore, meekness is associated with weakness when the two couldn't be any different. Please talk about the perception of the meekness of Jesus versus weakness. And that Jesus was not at all timid. He was a man of great conviction in the way he lived his life, especially those 3 years where he was leading his disciples and talking among the people. And he never backed down from a challenge. I wanted to kind of live in this part of the book for a moment, because I feel it just has so much value, especially for men today.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's awesome. When we think of Jesus, we think of like our Sunday school, book, or it depends where, what your cultural reference is. I think the world tries to paint him as this like clean, hippie type character. He's got his sandals on. He's kind of roaming the countryside. Free flowing hair, doesn't really look like he's ever worked in his life, maybe on the thin side. And he's just got the message of love, right? Oh, I love Jesus's message. Like the world wants to take that and say, okay, he's all about love. I even said that sums up his character, but we confuse that with he had this message of love and acceptance, and he's weak and he's wispy and he's just he's there to help us do good in life and keep a moral code. And like, let's put him in the same bucket as all these other, people that inspire us throughout the pages of history. But that's not really who Jesus is at all. So let's rewind for a minute and talk about the way he came into planet Earth, this atmosphere, right? So he could have been born in any class of society. The Father could have picked any sect, any family, any class for him to enter into to live out the human experience as the God-man. And he is 100% God, but he's also 100% man, and he can relate to us in every aspect of our humanity, except that he never sins. He never misses the mark. He never succumbs to any temptation. So he comes in as a blue-collar worker. Right? We think he's a carpenter. He's really a builder. That's what I'm most comfortable saying. And he grew up in an area of Galilee where it wasn't really a lot of wood there. It was more stone. So it's really possible that he was a mason, or possibly what I mean is a stonemason or a builder that worked with stone and wood. And if we fast forward to the New Testament, we see there's a lot of references to stone. Actually, Christians are known as living stones. He's the chief cornerstone, right? So it's very possible that he worked with stone. I believe that he did. So he was not weak, right? Let's just talk about his physical stature. He would have been strong. He would have been a construction guy. So from that perspective, physically, he's strong. I got like 8 different examples I could give you to prove that I believe he was strong and in great shape. We won't go down that road right now all the way. But what I will say is let's get into the meekness side, because let's, talk about where this comes from, because he does say some statements, love your neighbor, turn the other cheek, and he's teaching us to be conformed to his image. And sometimes that takes way more strength than hitting back or doing something different. So we got this term meekness, but what is that term? How do we even define it? Because no one really uses that in today's vernacular, right? So I looked it up and I'm like, what is this? The meek inherit the earth. Jesus is meek. Be like me. Take on my yoke. and my yoke is easy and it's light. And really what meekness means, it's the opposite of weak. It's actually incredibly powerful. However, it's power under control. So that's my definition that I like the most to find what meekness is. And Jesus is power under control. He's so powerful that in certain scenarios and situations where he could do something back, he doesn't, right? He uses restraint where he could take a different tact or come in a different way. Ultimately, when he's on the cross, when he's standing before Pilate, he had within his realm access to angels. He had within his realm access to unearthly resources that could have flipped the tables, but it would have destroyed his mission. So he stays the course in total devotion to his Father. He's submitted, and he exemplifies power under control, which is really a life of discipline is what we're talking about. Extreme discipline, extreme diligence to show restraint in certain areas of his life.
Very well said. I love it. And I thought it was such an important point to make, because if more men were able to live that out, myself included, where we had the power to control our emotions and not lose our heads and not let our frustrations get the best of us. It's almost a daily thing, right? Especially as a father, right, and a husband, and the pressures of life and the busyness and speed of life can sneak up on us sometimes. But to have that and to be steady and calm in the storm, so to speak, unbelievable superpower that some people seem to have. I always I think of like the Tony Dungy of head football coaches. The guy never looked rattled, and little did we know at the time, if you go back far enough, I don't think a lot of people knew that this man had a huge heart for God. But wow, why is he such a good coach? Why do his players just play so hard for him? And then now, last couple decades, everyone knows Tony Dungy's, what he's doing in the world. But it's people like that I kind of think, man, if I could be a bit more like that in the way that I was handling myself, that meek quality. Tony Dungy, just for an example, was no weak guy. He was a pro football player for several years and, a pretty awesome man's man, you know what I mean? So it has nothing to do with, how strong you are, your physical ability. So pretty awesome though. I love thinking of Jesus as just a tough, strong, man's man. A guy that you wanted to hang out with. That's why he had a bunch of followers, because these guys were like, this dude's cool. I like this guy. I'm going to walk and follow him.
And think about his followers. He didn't, we were talking about he comes in as a blue collar worker. That's where he gets his guys too. He's got a couple guys from some different backgrounds, but he goes into the marketplace. He doesn't go into the seminary or the Bible school of the day and say, I need the guys with the most academic training. He's like, I want that fisherman. You guys over there, I'll take the tax collector. Like, you guys come with me. And he picks like roughnecks. Like, these guys are wild. And we see 12 different personalities, and like Simon Peter's the strong-willed guy. He's always like putting his foot in his mouth, and he says it first before he thinks it through. And then we see all the different dynamic we can find our personality in there as well, and we can see how Jesus responds to them.
Yeah, no doubt, for sure. He definitely selected a lot of guys that were you wouldn't think would be his first or top picks. But I think that's what made it all the more relatable.
Yeah, and Chris,
for us as human beings.
And they want to follow him. So we're talking about Jesus as a man's man. Well, you can't take the guy from the fishing dock and make him follow a guy that the world thinks is like this guy with a white robe that just floats around in the pasture over there. Like, we're talking about a real guy. They're like, okay. There's something like, there's a spiritual element, but there's something physical there too, where they're like, yeah, I'll do life with this guy. Like, I'll give up everything. So like there's some stuff we could dig into on that, but definitely man's man.
Without question. No, and I just, it's so great. Before I get to this next point, I actually wanted to read one quick piece of scripture towards the end of the book, actually, from Matthew. just to show how not weak Jesus was, or how he never, he didn't shy away from confrontation. So this is Matthew 21, 12 and 13. Upon entering Jerusalem, Jesus went directly into the temple area and drove away all the merchants who were buying and selling their goods. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the stands of those selling doves, and he said to them, "My dwelling place will be known as a house of prayer, but you have made it into a hangout for thieves." I mean, just that alone right there from Matthew. Jesus walked into a place and overturned tables and, in essence, yelled or shouted at people. Well, yes, he was. If he saw something that wasn't right, he confronted it immediately. And there's several accounts of that in the Bible, and that you put in the book, which is very important to know. And it's also, Tony Evans in his Kingdom Man book, and this is his devotion, talks about that all the time. We are not following a man who shied away from things. But he just did it the right way. That's the thing. He did it in love. He did it for all the right reasons, So important. What would you say, Josh, to a man who is in need of encouragement right now, in need of guidance and fellowship and seeking wisdom, but claims to not be a Christian, or claims not to be interested in biblical teachings and or wisdom? So somebody who says, yes, I want to be a better man. I need, growth. I need to improve in this or that or the other. However, I'm not really a religious guy. I don't know about all that, Jesus stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Well, listen, we are, I'm going to anchor to the title of this show, Strong by Design. We were made with an original intention. We were fashioned in our Father's image and likeness. There's a call on everyone's life, everyone that's listening to this, and you can try and be good on your own. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Go be good, be a great guy, seek to maximize your potential, do all that stuff. But without Jesus in your life, it really is shallow and it's empty, because we have a spirit within us, right? So we're a three-part being. We're spirit, soul, and body. And I love the show, Chris, because you talk about these different aspects and you address them, about how do we maximize our potential. And so you have a spirit man within you, and that part of you is eternal, and that part is going to live forever. And that's the part that wants to be reconnected with the original purpose and intent of the Creator. And we can do a lot of different stuff. And, some people, not your audience, but some people are looking to find fulfillment through drugs, or they do it through a different lifestyle that you guys don't exhibit here. And then there's many people, they're trying to fill that void. They're trying to find that connection and anchor to what is the best version of myself? How do I maximize everything I am? How do I be the person I'm made to be? But everything's going to come back to this. Why are we here? Who created us? Because, and I know you had a lot of different guests on your show that talk about this from different angles, but it takes more faith not to believe in intelligent design and that there's a creator for my life than there is not to accept that. So now, what's the next step? If I can acknowledge that this just didn't happen by accident, the distance from the sun, the way our bodies function, the creatures that we are, the marvelous and wonderful ways that our bodies work together, and everything that keeps this planet held together, then it becomes our duty to find out, well, what is the original design? What is this? And I want to tell that guy that's not sure that Jesus sets the standard and has a plan, a purpose for his life. But we have this thing that happened. If we go back to Genesis, we were designed, we were given a mandate, we were supposed to be the kings of the earth, but God also esteems our free will. He esteems it so much that he doesn't touch it. He allows you to have that faculty to say, you know what, that I'm going to leave alone. You get to decide. And man made a choice. And because of that choice, we're still suffering from the consequences of sin entering the world, because of rebellion and because of turning our back on the original design that God had. But he has another design. He had another plan from the foundation of the world, and that was to send Jesus to redeem the world and offer us a path back to God. And that is only what truly satisfies. That is only where you'll find your ultimate fulfillment. Being good, doing good things, writing a book, giving money away, expressing, acquiring money, all this stuff is great, but it's just covering up the surface. It's never going to bring you true fulfillment that only Jesus gives you. And there's nothing like this adventure of walking with him every day. And I don't want to paint this picture. I want to be careful not to paint this picture when I say fulfillment, like he's here to make us happy and that's it. Right? Like, hey, it's this beautiful life, brother. Just come and be a Christian. Everything gets better. Chris,
everything will get easy.
Well, you held up the Bible and you said, this is the story of men and women who've written about Jesus, and the Old Testament points to him. Well, how about the first generation, the first century of believers, living in the first century? How about they gave their lives up for it? They were lit up as human torches for something they believed in with so much conviction that they would gladly die for that. So there is this role of suffering. There is this role of dying daily to ourself. That's that whole self-mastery portion of the book that we referenced earlier. But God wants to save us, but then he wants to change us. And to be the man we're created and called to be means there's things we're dying to, and there are things we're coming alive to. So it's a reordering and an alignment.
That's right.
Yeah.
It is. It's sacrifice, right? It's the sacrifice that every mom makes for her family, right? In pouring herself out for her children and her husband, right? It's the sacrifices that a man makes when he goes off to war, and he's going to sacrifice himself, or is willing to, for his country, right? Because he would die for his country, and that's what Jesus did for all of us. And every single one of us, whether we are looking for a relationship or we aren't, he did the same thing for all of us. And that's what makes it so special. And so to live out, there's no greater love than to sacrifice yourself for someone else. There is no greater love. That's what we're called to do. But sacrifice doesn't necessarily mean, putting yourself, letting yourself die for someone else, but it's dying to your own selfish needs and wants. It's dying to ego in order to put others before you. So it's in essence living a life of service, right? Living a life where you're pouring into others rather than just looking inward. It's giving of yourself to others. And I think that's what's so special about this, and getting to know him on a more one-on-one relationship through prayer and through time in the Word and through books like what you've created here. That's what keeps that relationships growing and forming and getting better and better over time. And it's never too late. How many people, like our friend Frank, he lived, 35 years or so without any relationship, right, with his Creator, and then now there's no stopping him over the last 3 years or so. So it doesn't matter where you are in life. You could be saved at any point in your life, and your life will never look or feel the same. And I really love what you've done here, Josh. It's such a special thing. So what's next for the Standard? Obviously, you shared something with me. It looks like you really have some exciting things in store for your audience. Please enlighten us as to what is available to people.
Yeah. So first of all, Chris, thank you very much. The book is available. So anyone that's interested in the message or wants to go deeper, you can get the book. I also have a study guide that goes with it. I have a lot of small groups. I have some guys, just meeting together that want to go through it. A couple guys that are, taking their church through it. So that's available for anyone that wants to learn about that. But what's really been on my heart, and I think you'll appreciate this too, because of the physical stewardship that you exhibit in your life. And we love training, right? And people that listen to this podcast podcast, most likely, you keep yourself sharp. There's a physical stewardship dimension where, training is such a metaphor for life, right? Just the push and the pull and the grind and, going that one more rep. And, I've just find so much meaning and purpose in that. And it also develops discipline. And we know that when you develop discipline in one area, it spills over everywhere. So to that end, what I've created is a follow-up to the standard for guys that say, hey, I read the book, now what? What's next? Well, if you've been in church culture, Christianity, usually it's really common to hear when you want to go deeper in your walk with the Lord, or you're ready for the next step, we usually say, hey man, pray and read your Bible. Like, pray and read the word. And I've said it many times and I've done it, and it is solid advice. Yes, you should do both those things. However, for some guys, we look at that and say, okay, well, how do I do that? Like, am I reading the Bible in a year? Am I doing a reading plan? What style of prayer? Like, what's this look like? So I believe that there's three things that every man needs. Number one, you have access to what I call an unfair advantage. We just talked about coming to the Lord or talking to that guy who doesn't know what we're talking about. We did talk about, there's some suffering, there's serving, there's conforming, there's dying to self, but there's also a flip side where God gives us favor, where God blesses us, where God establishes our path and our steps. And I call that accessing your unfair advantage, because we can see throughout the Bible, there's many men of God and women that lived just like we do in the real world. These weren't ministers. We have Joseph, we have Daniel, and these people were promoted within the system they were in, and they were able to do something and accomplish something that God called them to do. And I believe everyone listening has a purpose and there's a plan over your life, but we need to tap into that. So I believe that when we spend our morning with the Lord in a specific morning routine, Jesus could be found praying early in the morning. Just like you as an athlete, just like every CEO, every successful person has a morning routine. Every man needs a morning routine. So I have a spiritual morning routine that I go through. It's a way that I meditate on the word and the way I pray. And so that's part of this program I put together. There's also mastering daily discipline. We need that. So there's a training portion of it. And then lastly, I believe we all have to upgrade our environment, because no one is designed to live this Christian life all alone. Our natural habitat is community and being with other brothers. So there's three core planks to the program: access your unfair advantage through your new spiritual morning routine, master daily discipline with your physical training, and then also upgrade your environment with a group of like-minded men. This is called the Kingdom Driven Man Challenge. I just kicked off one recently, and it's going great so far. We're just a couple days in, but it's something I plan on doing on a revolving basis. So if men are interested, they can check out kingdomdrivenman.com.
That's fantastic. kingdomdrivenman.com. And then, of course, they can find the standard, Discovering Jesus as the Standard for Masculinity, just about anywhere they want to find it, right? Amazon obviously would probably be one of the good quick spots for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Amazon is where it's sold. You can get the Audible version. The main place, if someone wants one place to remember and one place to go to standard59.com, standard59.com. That will take you to, everything I'm doing. You'll see it all from there. It's easy to remember, and it's a lot easier than trying to spell my last name.
That's right. Hey, can we get the cool S59 hats there? Are those available?
I'll hook you up, Chris. Yeah, we'll talk about that. But yeah,
yeah, baby. Got to get it. Got to do it. Got to get the swag. So, well, it's absolutely a pleasure, Josh. It's a long time coming. Really enjoyed getting to know you and the book a little bit better. I know our audience did. Can't wait to see the feedback from our listenership. And hey, this is the time. Hit that 5 stars. Hit the 3 little dots there if you're listening on an iPhone, and share it with a friend or a family member. It's just a couple little taps on your phone, and you could share this with a friend of yours, a coworker, your dad or your son, or a relative of any kind. So please do that, because I know it always means more when it comes to you from someone that you care about, that cares about you, and they say, hey, I really found this helpful or useful. I really enjoyed this. And when that's shared, and it just, it's spreading such goodness into the world, and God knows the world needs it today more than ever. So thank you again for following Strong by Design. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back next week. As always, Wednesday, a new episode releases here on the podcast. And it's been another fantastic one. God bless you. We'll talk with you very soon.